Hello everyone, welcome to another video. It is me, Desiree, and today I wanted to talk about some mistakes I made and how you can avoid them. And I feel like a lot of the time when I've watched these videos or like things you shouldn't do as a beginner, one of the things that's always said is don't buy too many plants at once. And I don't think that's a mistake. I wouldn't have taken that back if I could, because I was buying up all the plants when I first started. When I first started getting into plants, because I was seeing them for the first time. I was seeing like just plants I had never really paid attention to before. And I don't think that's wrong to buy them all. I don't think it's a mistake, because you're gonna learn as you go. You'll figure it out. You'll figure out where to put them. You'll look up how to care for them. I think that's totally fine. I'm not gonna tell you not to buy the plant. But there are some things that I think just, I don't know, tips that I want to pass along in case you're new, in case you're just discovering the plant world and you're kind of overwhelmed or confused. Hopefully these might be a little bit helpful. These are things that now, looking back, I feel like I probably could have done without that. So the first mistake I made was thinking I wouldn't kill a plant. So when I first was collecting plants and buying them all up and bringing them all to my house, I thought every single one of them was gonna live. I thought instinctively I would just know how to take care of them. They would just grow and live, and I could just, I don't know, I just thought that that's how it was gonna happen, that I would just know how to take care of them and they would never die. But lo and behold, most of them died. I still kill plants all the time. I share them here in my videos. I do think that was a mistake back then, because I inevitably would get super upset when one of them would die, because of course I should have known how to take care of it. I should have looked it up. I shouldn't have bought it, and I was being really hard on myself. And it's okay. Plants are gonna die. It's gonna happen. I'm sure some of you out there are unicorns and you have never killed a plant in your whole life. Share your secrets in the comments, because we all want to be unicorns. But inevitably it's going to happen, and I know it's gonna feel sad, but it's just a plant, you know, especially if it's something inexpensive that you bought at the grocery store, you bought at some place near you. Just go buy it again, try it again, do some research, and try the plant out again. It doesn't mean you don't have a green thumb. It doesn't mean you have a black thumb. It doesn't mean anything. Plants just die, and it's not your fault. Maybe it was, but don't be too hard on yourself. It's just a plant. And that is definitely a mistake I made back then, because I thought, my cat's down there burying his food bowl, so no one will find it. I'm trying to do something, cat. Okay, but that definitely was something that I would say was a mistake, because I inevitably ended up being so hard on myself with killing plants and feeling like I was wasting money and I shouldn't have bought it in the first place. But they're gonna die. Just accept it, just be okay with it. Appreciate the plants you still have and try to learn something from that plant not living. And if you want to try it again, go ahead, it's fine. It's just plants. The next mistake I made, and this is another one where I'm sure some of you out there have unicorn plants, but the mistake I made was putting the plant in whatever planter I wanted it to be in, regardless of the size. So I still do this. I still do this to this day. And I just recently potted or repotted a philodendron fuzzy petiole, but I wanted it in a pot that was obviously too small, and I forced it in there. I smushed it and smushed it and smushed it, and I made it fit in there, but it's so tight in there. I'm sure it's gonna outgrow that pot really fast. And I did it with that planter. I did it with the, it's either a Christmas cactus or a Thanksgiving cactus, one of those. I wanted it in a certain pot, and it's like a mound of soil like this, because it's too small for the plant, but I want it in that pot, so I put it in there. Those two just happen to be doing fine, and I feel like when you're putting it into a smaller pot, it's okay. It might outgrow it a little faster, but one of the mistakes I made a lot was putting it into a huge pot, either because that's the only planter I had, or it was the one I thought it would look the best in. But you know, one of the things people say all the time when they're repotting, only move up 1 or 2 inches when you're repotting a plant. I would say only move up 1 inch, but I make that mistake all the time. For example, a few of my Hoyas that I have talked about here before, I put in huge planters, and the roots were so short, like the plant did not even need to be in the pot it was in. It needed to be downsized, I think. But one thing that happens when you put a plant in too big of a pot, especially a house plant, it's very different when you're potting outside, because the plants are just different. But for indoor plants, you want to keep it in a size appropriate planter, because when you have so much soil in a big planter and a little tiny plant, the roots can only absorb so much water. So there's all this wet soil in there and the roots, they can't take it all in. So what ends up happening, they're just staying wet and they will start rotting. I killed my favorite plant of all time, the creeping Charlie. Luckily I took all the cuttings I could off of it and it's still doing well. But yeah, I put that plant in a really big pot because I just thought it was gonna keep growing and it actually died. So lesson learned the hard way. If you want to repot your plants, don't put it in a really big pot. Just start with either keep it in the nursery pot. You don't have to repot everything right away. You can keep it in the nursery pot as long as you want. So if you're going to repot, pick a size appropriate planter. Definitely not something too big because it might be detrimental to your plant. And that was definitely a mistake I made and continue to make, because every time I replant something into a bigger pot, I'm like, this one's gonna work out. This one's definitely gonna work out. And no, just last summer I killed my favorite plant by putting it in too big of a pot. So mistake I still make. Hopefully you can learn from my mistakes. The next one, this one might be, you know, iffy, but the mistake I made back then was caring too much about the temperature and the humidity that the plant needed. So one of the things, and one of the other mistakes I have here that I'll talk about in a minute, is watching care guides. Care guides are not videos I like to make. I'll never make one. I don't like watching them because the person that's making that care guide, they only know how to take care of those plants in their house, in their environment. They don't know your plant. They don't know your house, the lighting, your soil. They don't know anything about your plant. So I used to take those as like the be all end all of plant care, but in reality, they're just helpful tips and suggestions. And not that there's anything wrong with those videos. I'm sure lots of people have learned a lot from them. They're just not for me. I find I learn a lot more from the plant than I have from watching a care guide. And one of the mistakes I made back then was watching care guides, and inevitably one of the things that are always mentioned are what the percentage of humidity the plant needs and the temperature it needs to stay in. And it's always like, the temperature needs to be 52 degrees to 63 degrees. So I was like obsessed with the temperature. I was constantly looking and I was like, oh my God, it's 51 degrees, the plant is gonna die. Or it's 65 degrees, the plant is gonna die, I need to put the fan in front of it. Like, the plants are not that temperamental with temperature. I'm sure there are plants out there that are. But unless you're keeping your plant outside and it's growing outside, you need to know what zone you could keep that plant in. There really isn't a need to know the exact temperature threshold that the plant can live in, because most of the time it's gonna be just fine. If you left all your windows open on a wintry, snowy night, your plants might get a little damage on them. But for the most part, if you're comfortable in your house, your plants are gonna be comfortable in your house. Don't obsess about the temperature. And also the humidity percent. Like, I don't run a humidifier on a day-to-day basis. I wanna say last year I probably turned it on 20 times. This year I haven't even turned it on once. Or maybe it did put it on once actually, just to use the rest of the water that had been sitting in it. I don't have a humidity monitor. It doesn't matter what the percentage of the humidity is that's around the plant. The plant doesn't know, like, this is only 48% humidity and I need 50% humidity. I'm just gonna go ahead and die now. Like, that's never going to happen. If you want humidity on your plants, put them on your plants. Don't worry about the percent too much. If you know that your plants need high humidity, obviously you're probably gonna care about that. But for the most part, when you're starting out, it doesn't matter what the humidity is. If you feel like it wants a humidifier, put a humidifier near it. You don't need to be obsessed with that, because most likely you have a bunch of plants to obsess over, and obsessing over the temperature and the humidity percent are not gonna help with the stress. Just, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. I've never cared about it since, and it doesn't matter. Does that make sense? So the last two kind of go hand in hand, I think. The last two are taking advice as gospel and watching care guides and thinking they were the be-all, end-all of plant care. And then also diagnosing my plant ailment online without varying my sources. But one thing I did that I did find was a mistake for sure was taking advice as gospel, like, okay, it needs to have between 50 and 60 degrees. I need to have 57% humidity at all times. If it drops at all, the plant's gonna die. I need to get this special pot for it. The soil, like the soil that people have discount codes for. You know, I was trying to do all of that stuff because I thought that's what you needed. You needed to buy the fancy soil and you needed all the things. And I took all that advice as like the be-all, end-all of plant care. Like, those people knew what they were doing. They had a YouTube channel. They have to know what they're talking about. And although I did pick up a lot of helpful tips along the way, you're gonna learn a lot more from the plant, you know what I'm saying? And the last one is diagnosing my plant ailment online. Oh my goodness. There is so much crappy advice out there. There are horrible plant apps out there trying to ruin your life. There's this app that I keep getting an ad for called Plantin. They are doing some 5-minute crafts type stuff on their app. I'm gonna play a little video right here for you because I screen recorded this because I couldn't believe they were saying this as advice. They say to put a cup of milk in your plant, to put a whole cup of coffee, just pour it into your plant. They have some crazy advice on there, and I'm gonna say, don't download any of those apps. These apps don't know what they're talking about. Like, it makes no sense. You know, like even in this clip that I'm showing, they don't even put the milk or the coffee, I don't remember which one it is, in the plant with the plant in it. They're putting it in an empty pot of soil. And then it's like a few weeks later, a beautiful plant. Like, they didn't even pour it in there with the plant. So I don't know what the heck these plant apps are doing, but it's wild. Please do not follow their advice. But one of the mistakes I made was following that weirdo advice I was finding online, trying to diagnose a spot on my plant on the internet, because everybody's gonna have a different thing to say. They're gonna say just cut it off. They're gonna say cut the whole leaf off. Literally, I got advice to just throw out my peace lily because it had what I now realize was scale. It had like this weird sticky stuff on it, and I kept blaming my boyfriend that he was spilling something on my plant. Turned out it was a pest. I cleaned the heck out of it several times. The plant's doing fine. But literally one of the pieces of advice I got was you should just throw the plant out. There's no coming back from that. Get a new one. If you have an ailment on your plant, a brown spot, anything like that, I would say go to the YouTube channels that you like watching. Try to find the advice that they show. Like the people that you do trust, you've seen their plants, you feel like you know their advice is pretty solid. Follow them and see what they would say about the plant rather than some weirdo blog that makes no sense or an app. One of the biggest things is to vary your sources. So if you download the Plantin app and you're pouring cups of milk and cups of coffee in your plant and suddenly they're all dying, definitely vary your sources. You know, look on YouTube, look on Instagram, look on blogs, you know, look everywhere. Take the pieces of advice you want and adapt those to your plants, but don't take every piece of advice as gospel, and definitely vary your sources. Like I was saying, very, very important. So that was a little rambly, got off topic, but those are some of the mistakes I made when I was first starting that I feel like I learned from them though, so I don't know if I would take them all back, but let's just do a quick recap. Thinking I wouldn't kill a plant, that's definitely a mistake. Caring too much about the temperature and humidity percent, repotting into way too big of a pot right away. The apps, like you don't need to download an app to do anything with your plants. Taking advice as gospel, taking care guides as gospel, and diagnosing my plant online without varying my sources. But that is it. Let me know some mistakes you made as a beginner. I would love to know what they are, or mistakes you still make. I would love to know what they are. I still put plants in way too small of a pot, way too big of a pot. I still make mistakes all the time. I share them here on my channel, but I would love to know some things you feel are mistakes or advice you would give to yourself if you were starting out, like you were just finding plants. What advice would you give to your younger plant self? I would love to know what they are. But that is it. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and I will see you tomorrow for another video. Goodbye.